cool. So Joey, first of all, like, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, Joey Gaurascio. I'm the head strength coach at Florida Atlantic University. Going into my fourth year there, I'm responsible for the preparation for football. Um, been coaching 13 years, been at a bunch of different schools throughout the country, working with a variety of sports, mainly with football throughout my career. Um, and excited to chop it up with you, man.
Nice. So first thing I want to ask is like, nowadays there's more and more sports science data. There's like GPS, there's like a force plate, there's like velocity based training. So uh when it comes like GPS data, in terms of like football players, what like what what metrics would you look into?
Yeah, so when you look at GPS, there's two classifications, in my opinion. Is you have to look at capacity, which is going to be total yardage, it's going to be player load, it's going to be IMA count, which is your basically your explosive movement count, your acceleration load, your high speed yardage, and then you're going to look at your performance metrics, which are going to be your peaks. So peak mile per hour, peak deceleration, peak acceleration. Um, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're looking at both. You want to make sure that in the training process that you prepare the athletes for the capacity side of it, whatever their position demands are, because it's going to be positionally in football because positions are so different. It's not like baseball or soccer or any of those sports where like they experience the same demands throughout the game. Like an O lineman only runs like 2,500 yards in a game versus a receiver who runs like 8,000 yards in a game, and they have really really different stress profiles. So we want to make sure that we're checking those boxes on in the preparation process while we're looking at those performance metrics and seeing increases in those performance metrics as well.
So just to clarify, is like numbers of change of direction count as like performance metrics or like capacity?
It'd be more capacity driven, right? Because it's a volume deal. It's a volume issue. So, and I think that's where a lot of people, in the conditioning process kind of miss the boat a little bit. Is like, okay, like if we go to practice and I got an O lineman and he's going to change direction roughly 100 to 125 times in a practice, right? But they're going to be fast, shorter area change of directions versus, okay, my receiver, he's going to change direction 50 times, but they're way more intense because of the entry velocity and the deceleration part of it, the deceleration forces that come along with it.
Cool. So since like there's capacity side of like metric and there's performance side of metric, how do you like determine like today's practice is a high intensity practice or today's practice is low intensity practice?
Yeah, so what we do is we have baselines per position. We work with a company called DataViz, and they've made it really easy to process our information. Um, and what we do essentially is we have baselines for each position group, and we've broken it down not just to, okay, hey, O line, D line, but to the centers, to the guards, to the tackles, slot receiver versus your outside receiver, all these different things. And what we do is we look at how far off their normal average are they, how many standard deviations off that average are they. We use Tim Gabbett's acute to chronic workload because it's just an easy way to process and understand how far how high the stress is or how low the stress is. And what we like to do is we like to also look at total accumulated um, volume in a week. So kind of having an idea, okay, like knowing the game is going to account for about 40% of our total volume in a week, like out of 100, right? So we want to make sure that we build up the right way. So if we're at 50% total volume on a Tuesday after a Sunday and a Tuesday, knowing that we only have 10% left of our 100% of that pie left because of the game that's approaching. We got to really simmer down on the Wednesday practice, really lower the volume side of it. And then it's individualistic, right? Because sometimes game plans change. Sometimes kids get hurt. Sometimes kids outperform other kids and they get increased workloads. So it's just that balancing act of comparing that, the apples to apples for that kid. What's his Tuesday look like compared to last Tuesday? Is there a spike? How high is the spike? If the spike is significant, we should definitely decrease the next day. If it's not, let's just continue to build. Let's hopefully keep him under about a 15% increase in his total workload and keep that thing moving and build a new baseline for that kid.
Nice. So, in terms of like, football, and when we look at performance data, like peak velocity, would you use peak metrics like GPS data to see if a player is overtrained or not? Or
I think you can. I think it's if they're not able to hit their peaks after, for me, it's we try to achieve a 90% of their best max sprint every week. Right. So if they're not able to do that, perform at that level, that's something that we definitely go and investigate, and we try to figure out what's going on. Are they extremely sore? Are they fatigued mentally? Are they hiding an injury? Or are their mechanics off? Is their output just not there? Are they decreasing, right? Like in their rate of force development? Like those things that we look at and we investigate, and we try to go in and intervene to make sure that, okay, hey, you lose speed, a certain percent of speed in 5 days, right? That's what Ishram said. Residual effect for speed is 5 days. So we want to make sure, again, like we're not getting slower as the season goes on, right? The most important part of the season is in November, the end of the season. Especially if you're in the mix for conference championship games and bowl games and all these things. We want to make sure that we're performing our best in November. I think a lot of that has to do with having progressive plans for controlling volume up to that point, but also for the exposure to performance elements. So you got to keep and maintain maximal speed, maximal strength, maximal deceleration forces, those things.
Just to make sure. So does that mean that you also program speed training into like your maybe strength training workout or like performance training?
So Thursday in our practice, what we'll do is we'll have a list of guys, because we'll already have 2 practices, done for the week. And Thursday is a lighter practice. And what we do is essentially, if you have not hit 85 or more, we grab you and pull you to the side at some point that is convenient in the practice, where you're in a fresh state, and we have you hit a fly 10, and we immediately evaluate the miles per hour that accompanied that fly 10. So we look and see, okay, hey, if I got a tight end, he needs to hit 18.5. He'll run that fly 10. My guy is tracking it live at the computer. He gives me thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, see you later, go, you're gone. He gives me thumbs down, we get another one. And what we do is we let them build up on the entire field, just a smooth, gradual build to hit a top speed. And our guys, they like to compete too. And we make a big deal about hitting fast speeds. Our coaches do too as well. And, so they're always, they're always trying to hit fast miles per hour. Like this last Thursday, we had like 18 guys over the 20-mile-an-hour mark. We had 2 guys over the 22-mile-an-hour mark. And then in game, actually Friday night, we had 9 guys over 20, and we had 2 guys over 21. So to me, I think they felt fresh. I think they feel explosive, considering that it's really, game 8 and it's deep in the season, and we're still able to have a lot of guys have maximal outputs.
Nice. So when it comes to like fatigue, like you mentioned, like we discussed a little previously. Besides like GPS data, did you also like implement like force plate or velocity based training to help you monitor athlete readiness or fatigue level?
Yeah, so we don't have a force plate, but we do utilize counter movement jump on a just chop mat. And we're always evaluating that and seeing how far off their standard or their mean they are. So that's something that we evaluate. And then we do have VBT. We have VMAX Pro. I think they changed their name to Encode now. They're a simply faster company, and we do evaluate and look at specific loads and see how far off they are from, their velocity side of it. We have a lot of auto regulation that goes on in season, based off of those velocities up or down. And if it's a guy I look at it like this: if it's like a 3-strike rule, if his GPS peak performance is down, his counter movement jump is down, and then his bar speed is down, we have a significant problem. It's not just like, oh, okay, he's tired. It's like, no, we missed a lot to get to this point to where this kid has a significant issue. So we want to make sure we don't get to that 3-strike rule, that 3rd strike. We want to make sure that we catch it preemptively earlier on and intervene earlier on, whatever that may look like. More recovery, reduce workload in practice, whatever that might be.
So 3 things like is like GPS data like peak velocity is the first thing that showed up in athletes fatigue level drop off. Is that the first thing that drop off, or like jump height?
Jump height can be deceiving because they could be neurally fatigued, but they can still jump well. Because to me, it's more of a contractile measurement, right? Like you still have the rate of force development that goes along with it, but if you're strong, you're strong, and you can still jump fatigued, because especially if it's only 1 jump or 2 jumps, right? The max speed, it definitely decreases. So I think you see the peak speed. Now, the only thing that can throw you off is if you have a practice, maybe like for football, on Wednesdays, our peak speeds are always low because we have short area, goal line, 3rd down emphasis in our practice, meaning like it's not 1st and 10, it's not longer routes, it's not more open space, it's more condensed. So you have to understand the context of the practice as well. That's why by that at the end of that Tuesday practice is a really good marker for us where our guys are at from a neural standpoint, because that's our 1st and 10 and our practice where we're playing in more open space.
Cool. So earlier you mentioned that there's capacity side of metric, there's performance side of metric, and I'm looking at my note now. And you also brought up like Tim Gabbett's acute chronic work ratio, sorry. So I work with a basketball environment, so I like heard a lot about how basketball strength coaches utilize acute chronic ratio, but when it's in football, is there any different in it? How do you guys utilize this?
Yeah, I just think it's a scale, right? Like it's a tool, and it's relative to your environment and your workloads and whatever metrics you have. So, I don't think it would be too different from what you look at, because you're probably, if you do have accelerometers or a GPS unit, you're looking at player load probably more than anything, right? And change of direction, because you're not going to get a ton of a distance is not an issue for you in a basketball practice, I'd imagine, right? It's the violent changes of direction and the jumping and the eccentric loads that accompany all the deacceleration work they do. I just think whatever metrics you have, just it's relative. So if it's low, it's under 0.8. If it's high, it's over 1.3. And, just stay true to it. Manage the spikes. That's the biggest thing is where you see kids get hurt is when you get a spike over 1.3 and then you get another one over 1.3. We try to follow that his protocol for increasing accumulation and volume as best as possible by 10 to maybe 15% increase day to day. And our coaches are really receptive to it. I have a really, really forward-thinking head coach who loves data and is extremely intelligent and likes to come up with plans and periodized practices, which is awesome. So, but again, I think it's just a tool. It's a scale, right? It fits whatever you need, whatever you're researching.
Nice. So, the other thing I want to ask is, I know like in football, there's a lot of like deceleration and change of direction. And in order to have like a great change of direction, you need to have like great deceleration. So, when you look at deceleration, no matter it's like vertical deceleration or horizontal, or like just multiplanar deceleration, how would you like program program deceleration into a training? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think every athlete needs to train deceleration. It's part of the sport. Okay, it's part of the sport, right? Unless you're running track where it's a straight line, and even then at the end of the race you have to stop. There's a stopping component to every sport that you play. The way we build it out is we want to make sure that we increase peak eccentric strength or force capacity, and then we want to increase eccentric rate of force capacity. So how strong am I in an eccentric capacity, and then how fast can I be strong in the eccentric capacity? So, I mean, I just look at it as, and I take the approach just like anyone would on the force velocity curve for concentric ability. Okay, so I look at it the same way. We're going to have fast eccentric exercises that are going to be more rate of force development dependent, and we're going to have slow eccentric exercises, which are going to be more peak force and strength. And, when you look at those slower eccentrics, I mean, there's, Cal Dietz, Powell Quinn, there's a million people out there that have written on tempo. Dr. Waggle is probably my main influence when it comes to eccentric rate of force development with, over the super maximal eccentric work with bands, whether it be, a band jump with the band pulling to the ground or dumbbell jump, where you release the dumbbells in the bottom, whatever it might be. And then we're big fans of altitude drops. So, you talk about, and then on the field where we train stopping. So how everyone trains acceleration, we have days where we train deceleration in the same capacity as a skill, not just as a drill. We teach it as a skill. We teach the mechanics of it, all the positioning of it, whether it be bilateral or unilateral, and we build out just like we do with our acceleration work and our speed work, our short to long program. We go short accelerations to longer accelerations, and we fit it to each position. Like our big guys don't need 15-yard build-ins to decelerate, right? But our skill guys will, at some point in time, run up almost 20 yards and stop. So we build all that in, and we do it in a concurrent model. Like I'm a big component of vertical integration. If it's important, train it year round, and then build up the intensities. So we're going to train it year round. We're going to progress the intensities as we train. Then we're going to add in, we're going to put it in more of a reactive environment, which is going to simulate what they have in sport. And then we're going to have a practice sport, and we're going to evaluate it, and we're going to make sure that it's not dropping off.
Cool. So since you guys don't have a force plate, how do you like monitor eccentric rate of force development or eccentric peak force? How do you look at?
Yeah, so we just got signed on to sports or Speed Signature. It's an Australian company that is able to force velocity profile all of our athletes through our catapult, through our GPS. It's an unbelievable company. And what we do is we look at through the GPS, we're able to get peak eccentric force, peak power, all of those different metrics through the GPS, which is unbelievable. And then also with VMAX or ENCODE, our VBT system, it has all of those eccentric metrics as well. So we're able to get it in different ways. Now, before I had any of this technology, what I would do is I'd look at, we had a deacceleration, horizontal deacceleration test where you would sprint 10 yards and we use timing gates. Okay, so you'd have to hit 90% or better of your best 10-yard sprint because we wanted maximum. We want a high entry velocity. On the outside of the gates, what we would do is we set a video camera up on the side, so we're getting a side profile, and we would record each individual athlete as they entered the deacceleration zone. So what we would do is we get the distance to stop, which in my opinion is directly connected to peak eccentric force, and then we get time to stop, which is, in my opinion, connected to eccentric rate of force. And what we would do is we get those two values and we make an eccentric, basically an eccentric or deacceleration score.
Nice. Love it. So I want to dive deeper into like the deceleration mechanics. So can you walk us through when it comes to like linear deceleration? How would you coach these, like let's say it's a wide receiver or running back, how would you coach his deceleration when it comes to linear?
So I'm all about making it simple. Like I'm not coaching kids at Harvard, right? Like I got a different demographic of kids. So anytime you try to have complex explanations, it just goes over their head. So, and I think a lot of coaches understand how to train acceleration, right? Like everybody, the buzzword is triple extension and knee, ankle, hip, and forward lean, and all these things. The acceleration is literally the opposite. It's it's backward lean, it's flexion of the hip, knee, and ankle. It's projecting your center of gravity low and behind your center of mass. Okay, it's about increasing your stride frequency, your step frequency. So not having super long strides, but actually having short, choppier steps. And then what I like to tell our guys all the time, that snap down, because like a lot of our kids already understand that snap down, especially like you said, the receivers and the running backs. But I want to go from, I tell them all the time, the easiest way, the analogy I use all the time is this. I say, what's easier to stop, an 18-wheeler or an F1 race car? And they all go, well, F1. I go, why? They go, because it's lower to the ground, right? So we want to be able to snap down and get our center of gravity low down to the ground as possible, okay, to stop our momentum. We want to make sure that every one of our strides or our foot contacts with the ground are in front of our body, not behind our body. So again, like if you understand acceleration training, you understand deacceleration mechanics as well, because it's literally the opposite. Just coach, like write down all the things that you would emphasize on acceleration and then write down what the opposite it is, and you'll have a great mechanical execution plan for all your athletes.
I like it. I like it. So would you teach them about like how to land their feet?
Yeah, so we talk all the time about, if we need to be strong, we need to have a bigger base. So that means I need full foot contact. I tell them all the time, toes are for go, your heels are for brakes. All right. So we want to make sure that we're getting a full foot contact. We want to make sure if we're landing in a bilateral stance that we widen our base as we sink down. If it's a unilateral stance, we want to make sure that that foot isn't casted out too far in front of our body and in front of our center of mass, because especially on that penultimate step, that last step going in, because then we get in an overextended position. And that's really, to be honest with you, that's the mechanism for ACL tears, is that overextended forward lean position where that leg's locked out in that deacceleration position. that tibia rotates in and then it's over, right? So we want to make sure that we're low. We want to make sure that we have a great base. We want to make sure that we're taking the adequate number of steps into it. All right. We don't want to tell them, hey, you just run full speed and drop down. No, like take 3 steps in, take that 3-step drop, right? Like, and walk down those stairs is another one I love to talk about. Like, that feeling of walking down the stairs where you're leaning back and slowing yourself down. So just, again, those are things that we do and we build out in our models all the way throughout the training process.
Man, I'm taking a lot of notes here. So is like horizontal deceleration or like multi-planar deceleration going to be the same with linear, or how is it going to be different?
Yeah, now when you get into frontal plane, right? With frontal plane, it's going to be different because you're going to have to shift your weight towards your inside foot. Okay, so majority of your weight is going to have to shift to that inside. Okay, because most likely you're setting up a change of direction. But B, that's where, again, the strength is going to be. That's where you're going to be able to have majority of your eccentric force be distributed, right? So we want to be on that force. Now, like when you get into like, frontal plane bounding and stuff like that, single leg, like again, it's very similar to where you want your center of mass inside that plant leg every single time. You don't want to be outside your base, and that's something that we talk about. I took a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with the name Ryan Ojeda, and then there's a guy named Eddie Grayer who's up. Eddie's the strength coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, assistant strength coach, and then Ryan Ojeda. They all worked at Parisi back in the day up in New Jersey, and I love Parisi's model for teaching basic support and center of mass manipulation. It's really easy and fundamental. So a lot of those mechanics that you learn through that tutorial for deacceleration in the frontal plane hold true to that.
Nice. Love this. I love this. So like you mentioned, you train a lot of like eccentric training, and you do a lot of like deceleration work on the court. So is these like, how would you program or periodize the eccentric training and all those deceleration on the court, off the court?
Yeah, and this is a question I get all the time. Because basketball is unlike any other sport really, because you're never out of season, right? Like you got coach 1-on-1s, you got 3-on-3s, all year, right? Like, I mean, realistically, especially in college, like these kids get like maybe 2 to 3 weeks off, and half the time they're still on the court anyway. Jumping and running and doing all these different things. To me, if you have the ability to monitor your athletes with technology, right, like with a GPS accelerometer, you give them what they're not getting. Okay, so if they're getting a ton of eccentric rate of force development on the court, like I don't need to train that. I'm getting it through sport, but does that mean I need eccentric peak force? Absolutely, and that's something that I'll supplement in. Um, and then I think from the technical side of it, like I tell people all the time, you have to be the master of your sport. You have to understand every nut and bolt. So, like, are you watching tape of your guys? Are their mechanics holding true that learning, that teaching model that you prescribed in the off season? Is it holding true in play? And if it's not, maybe they need a refresher course. Maybe they need, in the warm up, just end it with some 2 to 3 deaccelerations, linear or horizontal deaccelerations. In the weight room, maybe some altitude drops that you're really emphasizing deceleration mechanics. I just think, you have to watch tape and see where they're at. I think you have to, and then, you go again and you connect it to the GPS data or accelerometer data or whatever it may be, whatever you use, and you fill in the gaps in what the sport's not providing. It's like always like, oh, do you do jump training with basketball? I'm like, why would I do jump training if they're jumping every single day? Like, that's impossible. But can I train the attributes that help increase jumping ability? Absolutely.
Nice. So what about like in your environment, in football environment, how would you like prioritize eccentric training?
So with our big guys, that's a deep rabbit hole question.
Sorry.
You're good. It's a good question. I'll say that in season, because that's off season's easy, right? Because I got 7 to 8 weeks every year early, and then I got spring ball, and then I got 8 weeks in the summer. So I go short to long, and I increase the height of the altitude drops, and we increase the intensity. It's pretty simple progression. In season, I think, is where the complexity is at an all-time high, right? So for us, in season, to keep eccentric strength, I like to incorporate with our big guys yielding and overcoming isometrics, because that is a huge component to eccentric strength, right? Especially the yielding side of it. And it also helps with tissue stress capacity, which is big. Okay. With our skill guys and our mids, guys that are more stress shortening cycle driven in their sport and less concentric driven, we do a ton of altitude drops from high heights too. So it's venom. It's small doses of venom. It'll be like a 42-inch box and we're getting 6 reps. Okay. Why? Because I want peak. I want to just expose them to it. I want peak eccentric force on that element. And then again, I watch tape. I watch a lot of tape, and we talk about the and I've drilled into our guys over the years the importance of the acceleration mechanics. They take it serious, and I've showed them video evidence of when it, not our players, but when it does go wrong. Like I put up a video and I'll be like, why did this kid get hurt right here? And they're always too high going into his decel. He didn't take the necessary steps. His base is too narrow. Like, and they'll hit on it. Now, I want to make sure that we do have every once in a while a horizontal deceleration. And those are days where, again, I could supplement it in, I get it in. It might be a Tuesday. It might be a Thursday. It might be a Sunday or a Monday on their off day where they just want to come get extra work. So again, we just fit it in where we can fit it in.
Would you like do like super maximal eccentric maybe like super heavy back squat during like eccentric, mainly focus on eccentric during the season?
We have. So the early part of the season, when we got out of camp, there was a necessity to everyone knows camps are grind and you get beat down, and we did a good job tapering out of camp, but now it was time to elevate our strength levels again and get back to where we were going into camp. Once the fatigue had passed and we really came out of that and the fitness was starting to show through. So we did do some super maximal eccentrics. So we did some ALE loaded squats. The way we do it is we do it a Hatfield style. So we'll do a safety bar with handles, and we'll go no hands on the way down. So we get achieve super maximal. Like we want 110, 115%. I want 2 to 3 seconds on the way down. I only gave them like 2 to 3 reps total in the entire workout. Again, venom. But we attacked it. And some of those lows were significant. Like we got some strong kids on our team. There was some 600, 650 pounds on safety bars, and guys handled it. And I felt like we had a really, really good training effect from it too, as well. We're staying strong throughout the season, and our velocity numbers on our lower body lifting has shown that. And I think a lot of that has to do with us tapping that for a 3-week period early in the season.
Cool. So when it comes to like, because like in your environment you don't really utilize like you don't have like force plate, but you have like GPS data that help you determine athletes like readiness, athletes fatigue level, and what their eccentric peak force is. uh do you think that because there's like more and more and more data, more and more numbers, how do you like how like a strength coach can like implement all these? Do you think it's kind of helpful, or do you think it's kind of like too noisy?
I think if you don't have the right process to get the information organized and useful, it could definitely be noisy. Like I said, we use a company called DataViz, and if you have an API, you just literally download it all, and it spits it out to you, and it gives you all the summaries, right? It's automated, so it's AI is an unbelievable thing, right? Like it makes life pretty easy because it processes all the data. I've been that guy before that had the fanciest Excel sheets, and then I went to Google Sheets, and I had profiles and all these things. And you're so caught up in the maintenance of all those things, the sheets themselves, that you lose sometimes the ability to actually interpret what's going on. And it is extremely time consuming. But now with the emergence of all these companies, that automate these processes, man, it makes it really easy. It really does. I get a PDF after every practice, every workout, and it tells me who's at peak, who didn't, who's below average, who's above average, who's trending negatively, what position group is struggling, like everything you could think of, and it's spit out to me 5 minutes after I download all the information into the computer. So it's almost like we outsource sports science, and for an FAU who doesn't have the budget of a Auburn or a Georgia, that's helpful. That's extremely helpful because it frees up my assistants who would be in charge of that. It frees them up to actually put more time into the players or into other more important, pertinent tasks. But yes, it definitely, if and I've been guilty of it more times than not, of, hey, let's record this, hey, let's test this, hey, let's do this, and then you have all this information and you're like, okay, now what do you do with it? Like I have lateral broad jumps or lateral bound testing right and left leg, right, and I never did anything with it, but I have it. It's like, well, A, I don't know what the hell to compare it to outside of my own team, and then B, what am I even looking for? Like, all right, like displacement laterally in the far plane. Okay, I guess I don't know, but like we did it, and I'm like, at the time I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and then I'm looking at the data and I'm like, what the hell is, like, why did I do this? Like, it's just added noise. But to answer the question, I think you have to pinpoint what you're gonna die on the hill for. Okay, if it's total load, player load, if it's force plate data, whatever, like if it's peak power, peak force on force plate, whatever it may be, like figure out what's important to you. Okay, what you think's important and is needed in the sport, and make it important to the coach. That's the biggest thing.
Nice, nice, nice. Last question. It's also kind of big question. I know in football environment, uh, you guys use a lot of like Olympic weightlifting, no matter like pulling, clean pull, high pull, or just full catch. So how would you implement it from off season to in season?
Yeah, again, it's one of those deals where I'm gonna use the continuum of general to specific, right? So with my big guys, pulling from the ground from a static position is very specific. Range of motion, extension, and then load capacity, right? Like those are all going to be very specific. For my skill guys, we're going to use more hang variations because we want to incorporate the stretch shortening cycle. And then from a range of motion standpoint, we want to be closer and more specific to what they do in their sport. So, you know, in the off season, my big guys are going to get a lot more clean pulls. They're going to get a lot more full cleans. They're going to get a lot more power cleans from the ground. My skill guys are going to get a lot more hang variations. Instead of doing clean pulls, they're going to get a lot more barbell jumps or trap bar jumps. So, you know, I've been called an Olympic guy before. Like I absolutely love them. I use every variation where our guys are very competent with Olympic lifts. We snatch, we jerk, we do all those things. But at the same time, I'm married to adaptation, not necessarily exercises. So, and it's about making sure those athletes have the right adaptation. So it's more of a, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? You just need the right modality for what you're chasing at that time, right? So, you know, early off season, yeah, they'll clean from the floor. We'll get after it. And they love it, you know, because there is a large concentric component to what we do in our sports. But, you know, as we go through the training year, we'll go more hang variation and more restricted range of motions that are similar to what they experience.
And during the season, because there's more and more impact, would you use would you implement more like the catching or no?
Yeah, so in camp, we did more pulls than we did catches. And that was just because of the introduction of all the impacts to the shoulder and the wrist and the elbows, right? So like everyone's sore because you practice every day. When we got out of camp, we reintegrated back into catches. You know, now we're not like the police on, okay, hey, you got a sore wrist, you know, suck it up and clean, like, because we're supplemental to the field. So, you know, if a guy has an AC sprain, if a guy has a messed up wrist, like, we're going to make sure that we take care of that kid, right? So that might be a pull variation, or that might even be a barbell jump, or some, you know, we're very adaptable.
Cool. Just out of curiosity, like when it comes like really heavy clean pull, really heavy Olympic weightlifting, do you guys use straps?
No, we don't. We don't. Um, I if you were to use, I have used them when we did super maximal clean pulls, right? Because the grip was a limiting factor, and I wanted the speed of the bar to move fast and not turn into a deadlift. But that was a long time ago. We don't use straps, so no. I teach our kids do hook grip though.
Cool.
Yeah,
Love it.
they now they all love it.
Yeah. So that's basically all I have for you today. I'm super excited for like today's podcast. I really love the content you post on your Instagram. So for those who are interested in what we're talking about, or for those who want to learn about like GPS data you mentioned, for those who want to learn about like eccentric, like altitude landing you mentioned from your page, where can they reach out to you, or where can they find these information from you?
Yeah, at Twitter and Instagram, it's the same handle at Coach Joey G.
Nice, nice.